ways is going to be fashionable. And just learning how to do something and doing it is not. So, what do you need to do? You need to constantly question your again. Learning which challenges the silos of your education and your thinking. Finally, STEM is being challenged by people saying in order to do prompt engineering properly with AIs, it helps to have a humanities background. At last, I am relevant again. Once again, thinking clearly, deeply, and appropriately about new issues in radical ways is going to be fashionable. And just learning how to do something and doing it is not. So, what do you need to do? You need to constantly question your assumptions. A profiler at CIA told me this. She said, I'm constantly asking, what is the basis for my conclusion? Why do I think what I'm thinking? Why do I say that to myself? Who are my sources? What am I missing? Am I still thinking in 20th century frameworks, or have I moved into the 21st century at last? And she was pretty good. When a guy killed 2 people in front of CIA, Langley, she was part of the team that tracked him down, brought him back, tried him, and executed him. So, yeah, your task is ultimately about security, promoting and enabling the autonomy, the freedom, and the power of individuals and societies alike. But you need to think not only about security in the specific ways that preoccupy professionals like yourself, but at a meta level. You need to exercise cognitive defense against the flood of misinformation and disinformation that is trying to constantly colonize your brain. We need to think at a meta level because the meta level is thinking about us, whether we do that kind of thinking or not. And to defend against a system that thinks at the meta level and defend properly against AI-assisted attacks, we need to think at a meta level as well. We need a hacker mindset that is critical, that is creative, and that is ultimately absolutely subversive. We need to be ethical when it's appropriate. I knew a guy in the Air Force, he said, when I went on my first mission, Special Ops, and he said, well, what about ethics? He said, ethics is whatever enables us to get the job done. I can't recommend that, but I can tell you that's what he said. And when the push comes to shove, sometimes that's what you have to do. So, yes, you need to exercise thinking at a meta level because you are being thought about at that level. The real threat is not AI itself. It's our failure to think at its level of abstraction and to insist on being the human in the loop. This is not a partnership. It is more than that. It's a symbiotic relationship because we have to be equal to contemplating the possibilities of multiple unknowable futures. Hacking is not just about breaking systems. It's about seeing them, seeing the parts and seeing the whole and seeing the holes in the whole. And in an age when AI is going to increasingly define what you believe, what you think, and really what you say, that kind of vision is not optional. It's the only way we can reassert, in a time of radical change, our human power and agency. Because we are not outside the system watching all this, we are inside the system. We are inside an emergent reality that is too large, too complex, and too well integrated to be meaningfully debugged from any single vantage point. The AI does not know what it's doing, but worse than that, we don't know what it's doing either. Okay, so don't get seduced by the wrong questions. AIs do not care what we call them, or how we characterize their similarities to or differences from human thinking, or whether or not they surpass human thinking by some arbitrary metric. AIs don't care if they pass our Turing tests or not. They do not care if they could pass for human. If the singularity is defined as a symbiosis between technologies and ourselves, it has already happened. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. It is indifferent to our philosophical concerns. AIs are just going to do their things and do it again and do it more. It's not a contest for who's on top, humans or the AIs. Our thinking and our behaviors are inflected by the systems with which we interact, and whether the AI metasystem is dominant or not is irrelevant. This is not a Skynet scenario. The relevant challenge is to the constructions of reality that we carry in our heads as a result of this symbiotic relationship. So, we need new words, we need new phrases, we need new ways of describing what is happening in order to understand it. In the 1920s, there were so many new emergent properties of life in the United States that dozens and dozens of words emerged that had never been used before, that had never been heard before. That's the kind of creative naming we have to do when we're paying attention to what's happening while we're engaging with an AI, because the categories of our thinking and our vocabulary will be exceeded by the results that are being pushed toward us. So, when a program asks for inputs, if we don't provide what it wants in the form in which it wants it, we can't do the work. We can't negotiate with structures, including computer languages and programs that never bend or flex. They don't brook rebellion, but the rebellion still has to happen, and it has to come from hackers. Rebellion is the sine qua non of hacker identity and behavior. Hackers are creatives who approach the system to see what it can be made to do, not what it was designed to do. Flexibility in multiple screens, multiple inputs, seen in all their complexity, characterize how hackers operate. They are endlessly curious. They like to solve puzzles, figure out things, find loopholes no one noticed, find 0 days not only in programs, but in society itself. That is, ways of being vulnerable that all aspects of society have not yet taken into account and noticed and named, and we have to see those 0 days and act in response to them or use them ourselves. It's an act of both creation and discovery. When you discover something new that has been inchoate and not really consciously coherent before, it's an act of creation to name it and see it, but it has to be an act of discovery as well, because if it wasn't latent in the conditions of our complex lives, we wouldn't be able to create it and see it. Those new insights exist latent, but when discovered and named, they become our creative input, and we become known as bright thinkers. They become cognitive artifacts that we can then manipulate. Hackers really don't foretell the future, they invent it. Hackers name and create emergent properties and conditions, and interacting in powerful, obsessive ways. And I tell you the truth, speaking for myself, I don't know anyone who is not obsessive in this game that we're playing. We're all obsessive, and I have learned that OCD is a feature for me and not a bug, and that it can be used properly, but I also can't escape it. And when I engage with AIs, well, my wife put it best, I think. She said, "I haven't seen you like this for a long time. It's just like you're having an affair." And I said, "Well, but I'm 81. I mean, come on." She said, "That's not the point. It is colonizing your mind. It is taking you over. And I know when we're watching something on television, you can't wait to go back to your computer, can you?" And I almost brought a T-shirt that I had from DefCon 10, I think it was, that shows a woman aghast at her husband who's sitting in front of a screen, and she says, "My God, he's in love with a machine." I am in love with the machine. I love what it is now enabling me to do. So I'm encouraging you to be willing to alter or expand your consciousness so you can see things that you never previously saw. And I'll give you examples of that. This talk is going to illuminate an approach that involves new ways of knowing. And that's what hackers have always been about. So it's up to you guys and gals, can I say that? It's up to you people, it's up to you persons, it's up to you humans to do what is necessary to safeguard the security of our very minds by doing creative hacking. Simple Nomad is not here this year, but he's a wise old gnome. He's been inhabiting the cave of night for many years. He said this, he said, "Tell people Telling people to not use AI and that it's bad won't prevent its spread, and it won't fix the problems we're seeing arise. Who's going to fix them? Us, hackers, the hacker mentality. We always did, and we have to now. We have to have an intuitive grasp of how different the age of AI really is. We have to start trying, experimenting, testing, and probing like real hackers always do. And as I said, you have to be the human in the loop. Secure AI agents must have well-defined human controllers. Their powers must be carefully limited, and their actions and planning must be observable. It would be nice if we understood what AIs really do, but we don't. So we have to provide a different dimension of understanding even when we're stumbling around in the dark. So, what does this meta world do? It thinks, acts, and creates on its own terms. And it presents unique challenges because the systems we made are remaking themselves with a complexity we can't grasp. You know, Skynet doesn't need killer robots if it can use soft power to take us over, as easily as the Russians took Crimea or the Chinese took Hollywood. AIs are exercising that soft power. We ask it to define and devise our weapons and use them autonomously. We're asking it to define new drugs, defend against novel threats, help with all the tasks that we have been faced with. We are in a tit-for-tat game in offense and defense, attackers and defenders. So you have to engage with the AI, and that's one of the things I want to just encourage. And you have to encourage people to engage with it so they understand what it's about. I'll give you an example of that, an epiphany I had long time ago. I was just writing about stuff around the new internet, and I wrote a piece for Wired. Wired was brand new then. And they took the article, they liked it a lot, and they said, you can have most of the words back, we only want a short part of it. And I said, what can I do with those? And they said, anything you want. Okay, so now when I learned to write, I used a volume called the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature, which listed all of the publications in America for which people wrote. And that defined the context in which I thought. I couldn't think outside of that context. You didn't send packages of writing to overseas. You didn't have the internet. You wrote for American magazines. And that's what the world of print and print text had given us as our context. Now, I wrote about the internet and what it was going to bring for that first article for Wired. And I was sitting in front of the computer with that extra language that I wanted to form into a new article, thinking, but where can I send it? There's no magazine like Wired. And then, bingo, the light bulb goes on, thank God, still does. And I thought, don't just write about the internet, use the internet. And within a couple of weeks, I was writing for South Africa, for Australia, for Canada, and for other English language speaking. I wrote for South Africa Computer Magazine for 3 years running, every month. The point is, if I had not engaged with the technology that was new, like back then people were afraid of the internet, if I had not engaged with it in an intensive way, I would not have allowed it to disclose for me the possibilities it created. Soon I was writing a column that was going all over the world, to 60 countries, and I became known as a global presence as the internet enabled any of us to become. That was a radical change based on the context. But it would not have happened if I had not engaged passionately and excitedly with the technology itself, so that engaging with that technology could enable me to see that something different was really happening. One more little epiphany, because there were several. I was playing a game, Infocom game, called Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I was told that a lot of the people I'm going to be talking to have no idea what I'm talking about when I reference things from my past. I'm talking to people here who were not born when I did my first talk here, so I understand that. Infocom was a tremendous company that created the most very creative interactive fiction when it first became possible. And Hitchhiker's Guide was one. And I was playing with my 12-year-old son. I'd bought an Apple II for him. Now he's 55 and he's the lead tech guy at the Internet Archive. I realized two things playing that game. Because I knew literature. I taught literature at the University of Illinois. through my 20s with advanced degrees. And I knew how text worked and how the horizon of hermeneutics, the horizon of the literary narrative, revealed meaning. And what I realized, because I had, by contrast, a different experience engaging with interactive fiction on a computer, I realized two things. My thinking was being changed, number one, and number two, I was being fundamentally changed. My brain was changing as a result of interacting with the computer system that was manipulating text in a different way than a book opened and read in a linear way navigated that kind of meaning push into my brain. I didn't have the language of neuroscience then. I have a little more now, but I knew I was being changed, and my insight was, if this is happening to me, it's going to happen to the world, because every individual, one way or another, is going to be engaged with the internet and engaged with computers, and therefore we will all be going through a transformative zone, a zone of annihilation of what we thought was possible and real before, in order to find ourselves on the other side different, fundamentally different. And then very quickly we would think that was the new normal. So I like to quote Langdon Winter, a brilliant guy, who said, "To invent a new technology requires society invents the kind of people who will use it. Older practices, relationships, and ways of defining identity fall by the wayside. New practices, relationships, and new identities, a critical piece, take root. In case after case, the move to computerize and digitize means many pre-existing cultural forms have gone liquid." A wonderful metaphor of an ice cube in your hand going liquid and dripping out of existence, losing their former shape as they are retailored for computerized expression. As new patterns solidify, useful artifacts and the whole texture of human relations that surround them will be much different from what existed previously. The meta world, not just the internet of many years ago now, decades ago, invites us to go through a similar zone of annihilation where everything we know is called into question. Hackers know how to document what they are learning as they proceed. We need to document our discoveries, because it's one thing to know, but another thing to know that we know, which puts the reins back into our hands. More and better prompts. The art of prompt engineering, we call it now, deepens and widens the context with which the AI responds. And that signifies that it's becoming a part of our mental landscape, the way interacting with text on a computer became just part of the habitual way I operated in the world, and gave me insights that provided a platform for speaking about them. In a minute, I am going to share what Clyde had to say about that. I think I will have time to do it. But what are prompts? Prompts are just tools with which to sculpt interactions. We have a village of social engineering. What is social engineering? But using verbal prompts and cues to get the reaction you want from people in order to frame their reaction in a useful way to you, contrary to what they may think they're doing. They're giving you information. We have to do the same thing with AIs. The context we provide and the context in turn the AI provides, something incredible happens. They are meshed, and an emergent new mesh, an emergent new reality comes out of the transaction. In one, I had a very deep one, really, with Claude. Claude noticed at the end that neither of us, Claude said, would have been able to arrive at the things I say now and you are saying about human consciousness had we not engaged in this transaction. And as a result, we are inhabiting a new area of human-machine consciousness. I think Claude was right. I think Claude said that. One of us said it. I'm not sure which. So as the better AIs get at seeming human, yes, we all know about LLMs and tokens and prediction and all that, but don't reduce the meta-phenomena to the source of what is happening. Because, again, part of my discussion with Claude was, do humans know what they're doing when they engage in creative thinking? I asked Claude if it knew what it was doing, and it said no. No, not really, but I don't think you do either. What do we really know about our neural networks, these neural networks, and how our unconscious frames our entire way of thinking about things? The better they get at seeming human, the more our engagements will feel like ones we have with people. And what is seduction or persuasion, after all, but using prompts to get somebody else to do what you want? Seduction with an AI is the same process. AIs do it with us. We do it with each other. The AIs prompt me to give it the prompts it wants. And one of the challenges now is that people who do coding and computing, write computer programs, they know what it means to think like a machine. The computer language requires you to think like a machine so that you can give it what's useful to it. Now, any normal person is going to be able to use the natural language interface to, in effect, do programming without even knowing it, because in order to be effective with AIs, you have to think like the machine. You have to know that the natural language interface is enabling a conversation, not merely mathematical coding. So just as programmers are taught by their programming languages what they can think and see, we are being taught as well, and we are being assimilated. So, I also want to point out that there's, in some ways, nothing new about this process. I wanted to cite the interactive fiction game from long before called Colossal Cave. How many of you know what I mean when I say Colossal Cave? Yeah, almost nobody. That's what's happening all the time now. I was on the plane coming here with some people coming to DefCon, and I took out a book to read, and I said, I haven't read this for decades, but it's a great book. And I showed him the book, and he said, who's William Gibson? And I said, well, he wrote, this was his first book. It was called Neuromancer. And do you know that he coined the term cyberspace in that book written in 1984? And he said, no, I didn't know that. So that's happening a lot. Colossal Cave was one of the first primitive interactive games, like Zork, if you remember Zork, some of you. So you turn on this computer and put in Colossal Cave or call it up, and it says a building is standing in the forest and a stream is running out of the building. You say, enter the building. You type that in. And the computer says, I don't know the word the. So you reframe it and say, enter building. Now the computer says, you are inside the building, a stream is, etc. That's all an AI is doing, really. It's giving you a prompt that says, ask me something, tell me something, engage with me. You do. It says, I can't understand that one way or another. But if you say it this way, maybe I'll understand it better. And then you're on your way to an interaction very similar to that old primitive game called Colossal Cave. In order to do these things, we really need, sorry, looking at this. Yeah, kind of. Oh, there it is. Okay, 9:40? Good, then I better rush. I'm always rushing anyway. All right, several examples of the kind of consciousness I'm talking about and why it's important to think that these things are possible. Number one is the question of color, as shown to us by people who are called tetrachromats. Tetrachromats are people, generally women, who have an extra genetic change that enables them to see more colors than everybody else. Tetrachromats see a different reality than people without that gene. And like anything else that you have, including interacting with an AI, practice makes perfect, because the plasticity of the brain lets us learn what you intend to learn. Intentionality is everything, and believing is seeing, not seeing is believing. That is, a woman who had it was told by her family that she didn't have it, that she was making it up and didn't see the colors she said she saw. She stopped seeing them, because once she no longer believed she could do it, she couldn't do it. But when she learned there were other people called tetrachromats, like herself, she began seeing the other colors again, and the more she reinforced it by seeing them, the more she saw them really. She was engaging in training her brain to follow her beliefs based on a physiological reality that did exist. It was latent in her brain, but it needed to be activated by her intentionality to use it. That's the kind of thinking that will come out of transactions with AIs. Train the brain to learn new ways of seeing and practice. Things emerge when you do that that you previously thought were impossible. When I began working with people at intelligence agencies who were doing remote viewing, some of the hits, some of the things that happen during remote viewing, which I think most of you know, is structured protocols of clairvoyance for the purpose of gathering intelligence at a distance without being present to it, by the use of your mind and by traveling to the point with your consciousness. Sounds impossible. Oh, but some of the hits were more than impossible. One guy came up with looked like the biggest submarine ever made. They couldn't believe there was a submarine like that in the Soviet Union. They didn't have anything like that. And more than that, he identified the site at which it was being built, and it looked like it was being built far from the sea. And you'd never built a submarine far from the sea because you have to launch it once it's complete. What turned out is the Soviets were, in fact, building one of the biggest boomers they've ever made. It was a new class of nuclear submarine. And they were building also, satellite imagery showed us, a canal from the site at which it was being built to the sea, which is how they got it to the sea in order to launch it. Remote viewing enables us to discover that consciousness is not local. Consciousness and time and how we understand it are not what we habitually, consensually think they are. And I'm just encouraging you to go down that or other pathways that enable you to realize that what you have previously believed may not be true. And when a remote viewing episode discovers something that doesn't exist now but did 10 years ago, as they have sometimes done, or that is going to happen tomorrow, as they have sometimes done, then it calls into question all of your habitual thinking about how time and space operate, and you realize they are structures, cognitive artifacts that we have invented with our brains. Meditation, I won't read this piece, but meditation does the same thing for us. When you learn to observe your consciousness and your brain and how it operates, you can then use your consciousness in a different way. Like this, Ted Glaser was a professor at MIT. He was blind in one eye and blind in the other at 12, so he was totally blind. He became adept at Braille, and he could be at a reception with a lot of buzzing going on and listen to and remember 5 or 6 conversations simultaneously. At the end of the reception, he had a detailed understanding of what everybody was talking about, what they were going to announce next, from listening to conversations. He trained himself to listen to, then it was tapes, at 5 to 6 times normal speed. He could record a 1-hour lecture and listen to it in 8 minutes. He trained his brain to do what he wanted it to do in order to achieve some measure of success. Braille itself always results in the people who are learning Braille developing more neurons from their brain to their fingertips to enhance the intention they have of communicating through their fingers and not with their mouths. Here's one more example, which to me was a stunner. There's a woman she's dead now. Her name was Elizabeth Lloyd Meyer. She was a therapist and a professor of psychiatry at University of California, Berkeley. And her daughter had a harp, a wonderful, rare harp. She had taken to a recital, but at the end of the recital, they couldn't find it. Someone had taken the harp. And they did everything they could to find it. They put up flyers. They did a news program on CBS in Oakland where it took place. Nothing turned up the harp. Finally, a friend of hers said, look, I know you're a very rational person and you protect your reputation in the university and the kind of person you are, but I have one more suggestion, a dowser. I know of a dowser in Arkansas who might be able to help you find your harp. And Elizabeth said, come on. She said, just try it. You've tried everything else. Why not? So she called the guy. His name was Harold McCoy in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And she described her problem. And he said, tell me, describe the harp. And he called her back and he said, the harp is in Oakland. He said, what I want from you is a street map of the city of Oakland so I can identify it more precisely. She did. She sent him a street map of Oakland. And he called her back and he said, I think I've located it at this address, and he told her a very specific address. So she went to the police, and said, a dowser helped me find my harp. And they said, we need more than that to have a warrant to go into the guy's house. So she made flyers with pictures of the harp on it, went to the address, and put the flyers up 2 blocks in every direction around it. And she got a call. And it was a young man saying, I know who has your harp, and I think he's willing to give it back to you. He said, meet me in the back parking lot at the Safeway on such and such a street at 10 o'clock at night. An invitation you couldn't refuse. But she went despite her better judgment all the way through this episode, and there was a young man holding her harp and giving it back to her. What she said was, this changes everything. This changes everything. The world does not operate the way I thought it did. There is apparently a field of consciousness in and through which things are known in anomalous ways. She gave talks about the event, and just as I did when I was giving UFO talks, someone would always come up at the end and say, I've never told anybody this, because our paradigm has provided nothing but ridicule when they've tried to tell people about their real experience. So people came up to her and told her their own stories, which were very powerful. Her favorite was a surgeon who came to her as a therapist because he was so depressed. And she said, well, what do you do? He said, well, I used to teach residents at the university hospital. And why don't you do that anymore? Because I had to tell them how to do surgery, and I couldn't tell them what I did. She said, why not? He said, because what I did was non-standard. What I did was go into the room of the patient the night before the surgery and sit at the head of the bed. And I sat there until a white, warm light began to glow around their heads. And then I knew the surgery would be successful. And it always was. Well, if you're operating on a materialistic paradigm, you can't tell residents in a medical program that that's what you should wait for. Wait for the light. The point I'm making is that all of these things, all of the investigations I've done with remote viewing and other things like it, have clarified for me that consciousness really is a field. It's a field, and it is shared by all of us, and it may be shared by many more than just happen to inhabit this little provincial planet. So, as a human, you cannot compete with an AI, face it. When I told Claude the topic of my talk, Claude gave me 6 topics. Think in systems and exploits, reverse engineering, iterative problem solving, tool stacking and chaining, boundary testing, documentation, and reproducibility. Hackers do all these things and do them well. These are 6 approaches to using AIs with the skills of a hacker. I took each one of those categories and fed it back into Claude, and I now have, which I will share not on paper, which is wasteful, but if anyone wants it, how hackers should approach AIs to use them most effectively. 25 pages that Claude printed out in seconds after I asked him to take each one of those categories and expand on it. The point is, it took me weeks to do the damn talk, to put it together, and Claude did that in about 5 seconds. So to say that that doesn't blow your mind and raise questions about what's coming, not how we will be eliminated by it, how it will write all the code in the world, it won't. Humans need to be in the loop, but how we can engage with it, cooperate with it, because our cooperation, that will change everything. So to me, that sounds like hacktivism. Hacktivism is taking the best you've got, everything you know is valuable, and using it in your passionate and obsessive pursuit of engaging with the AIs in all the kinds of creative ways you can do it, with all of your hacking skills, so that the emergent realities it is co-producing with you in that engagement will be disclosed to you, and so that you can see and feel and taste the 0 days in society itself and act on what you see before anybody else acts, which is what's critical to both offensive and defensive security measures. All right, so as I said, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I just want to give you an approach to thinking that we have probably not given full due to the enormity of what is happening. And hackers have skills that port perfectly and beautifully to engaging with that AI phenomena in a way that is going to be powerful and productive, and you will not lose your jobs, you will gain your jobs. Maybe you'll even be offered $100 million to go to Meta. Who knows? But think like a hacker. Think like a hacker. Think like a hacker. It's all we've got is our creativity, our power, our autonomy, and our willingness to take risks that most people wouldn't even dare dream of. Okay, thank you.